Good evening, fine people of YouTube. How's it going? Hope everybody's having a great, well, I guess it's the end of the week. So hope everybody had a good one. Oh, let me mute my computer here. Technical issues, as always. Anyways. All right, proper headphones here. So, we're going to pick up from where we left off the previous two episodes. And this is going to be where actually we implement some of the stuff that we've gone over on the last two, with how I set up my mix template, some of the things that I do to make formatting somebody else's session easier into my template, so that way you can basically mix without having to think too much. The big goal, I guess, the big summary with why we spend so much time with all of these mix templates and everything is, and spends time thinking about how we're setting stuff up, and think about why we do things a certain way, is ultimately so once we actually sit down to mix, which hopefully that's more often than not, you can really focus and be focused on mixing and not have to worry about session management and creating new tracks and routing and picking plugins and effects and all that stuff. Because ultimately, we all have limited amounts of attention, brain power. I call it bandwidth. We all have limited bandwidth. And if you are getting hired to mix, or if you're mixing your own stuff, ultimately, you want to be focusing as much as possible on the stuff that really matters. And every time you got to click on a menu and try to find your way through there to get some sort of plugin or an auxiliary send set up or something like that, you're taking just this little bit away from whatever it is that you're actually trying to do. So there's a purpose to all of this, and that's kind of the overreaching purpose, to making this as seamless as possible so you can focus and everything just be instinctual and second nature, as opposed to letting the technical shit get in your way. So here we go. All right. Welcome, everybody. Okay, I am going to do one quick thing here. So today I've got a session that I'm going to be mixing soon. So this is an unreleased song. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play any audio. So I don't have any audio for you guys, but it's not going to necessarily that's not going to change anything. So, but I'm going to show you the session. We're going to walk through, like I said, I'm mixing this song. So I am doing this so that way I can mix it next week. That's the other thing I want to talk about really quickly. Mix setups. When you're actually going to set up a mix, or you're preparing for production or a session or a songwriting session or anything like that, I like to do my prep work not on the same day that I'm actually mixing the song. The other thing about limited bandwidth, we also only have kind of like there's a little bit of an expiration on your objectivity. And so if you are setting up the song, let's say in the morning, and mixing in the afternoon, by the time you start mixing, you'll have heard that song, I don't know, however many times you've been listening to different parts here and there. Oh, hang on one second. I think we're having some streaming issues. Is everybody seeing everything, or are we getting a little choppy? Looks like we're getting a little choppy. Okay, give me a second here, guys. I'm gonna try. Oh yeah, computers having problems. Let's close this for a second here. Yep, hold tight, guys. Definitely having some playback issues here. Something in my computer's not happy. Okay. Let me quit a couple things here and see what's what. Is this any better, guys? All right. Computer running too many things. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay, so I've had to quit my chat on my main page here, so bear with me. You know what I'm going to do? Until I get this going, I'm going to bring up this page so I can see the chat while we're getting going here. Let me reload that session. So this session that I'm going to be mixing is actually very got a lot of plugins on it already. So I'm wondering if maybe my computer's just bogged down. There's just a lot of plugins. So let's work through this together. Hey, part of the mix process is getting sessions that are just so loaded up with stuff they won't even play back. And it's funny, sometimes I'll find I'll get those sessions from people who are using a really old version of Pro Tools, and they'll be using an old computer, and I'm on not necessarily a new computer, but a pretty powerful computer. And sometimes I wonder, like, how the heck is it run on somebody else's computer? But okay, I'm just loading up the session here. Bear with me, guys. Stream settings. I'm wondering if there's a better stream setting here. Stream status. Okay, well, let's see how this does. If this starts getting choppy again, guys, which I see it is, I think I'm going to try to just restart the stream. Looks like it's pretty choppy for you guys again, isn't it? Choppy. Okay, I'm going to start the stream over. Everybody hold tight, okay? Okay, I am back. Better. Okay, hopefully this is better. Sorry about that, guys. Awesome. Okay. So you know what? I'll actually kind of circle back because I'm not sure where I started getting cut off by the choppiness and whether or not it was audio and video. But anyways, definitely alert me the minute it starts getting choppy again, if it does. So basically what I was saying before is make sure you're doing all your prep work at a separate time from your work. So if you are setting up a mix session, if you're hired to do a mix, and let's say Wednesday's your mix day, don't be setting up the mix on Wednesday morning. You've got limited objectivity, you've got limited brain power, you've got limited attention, and ultimately you want to save that for the thing that matters the most, which is the mixing. A lot of this setup can be done, like I said, we're not even going to listen to audio today. So the setup can be done while you're listening to a podcast. This setup can be done, at the end of the night when maybe you've worked all day and you're like not ready to necessarily pack it in. You just kind of want to do a few things. This can be done before work. This can be done after work. Just don't do it right before you're about to mix. That's a big mistake. So anyways, here we go. Let's dig in. And I think what we're going to do, looks like I've got excellent connection, it says. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just blowing through this and save your questions for the Q&A, or if you want to, put them in there, and then I'll kind of circle back. But I'm not going to stop and answer questions as they come in. I'm going to wait for kind of a good spot to break, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So, okay, here we go. All right, let me switch over to my screen. All right, so see all the stuff. So this is a session that I was sent to mix, and it's got a bunch of plugins, and actually the rough mix sounds really good already. So that's why I left all of these plugins, and I left the routing, and I left the automation, and everything is basically still in this session, like the way that it was given to me, and everything was done in the box the way it was given to me. So it's I hit play, it plays back. I have all the plugins, everything's good to go. So actually, there was one plugin I don't have, but I'll show you how to deal with that as well. So anyways, the first thing I'm going to do when I get a mix from somebody else is I'm going to bring in, I've got a window configuration. And if you guys don't know what window configurations are, read the manual. You know that by now, right? Know what a window configuration is. Window configurations are extremely important and extremely powerful. I actually don't utilize them enough. I've got one window configuration that just kind of sits there, and I use it as a default, and that's it. But if you've got a Stream Deck or using a SoundFlow on something else, you could really use window configurations for some tricky stuff, some really, really cool stuff where you have different window configuration for every little thing you do. So if you are, you're doing a mix setup, you can have one window configuration. If you're mixing, you can have another window configuration. If you are doing Melodyne, you can have another window configuration. Basically, what that does is it rearranges your entire window. It changes all the menus. It can change what you're looking at, what you're not looking at. It's pretty cool. So anyways, I'm going to bring that in from my mix template. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to do an import session data. And here's my mix template. I actually did an updated one earlier today in preparation for this. And you can import window configurations from other sessions. So I'm going to my mix template, which I have my default window configuration. You click this window configuration box right there and hit OK. And now, when you go up to, take a second. Like I said, this session's a little bit of a hog. When you go into window configurations up here, come on, you can do it. And like I said, I've got one here that's default. And now watch everything just automatically format the way that I like it in one click. Boom, boom, boom. Go, Pro Tools, you can do it. You can do it. We're going to free some tracks to make this thing a little bit more bearable. Because right now, it's not. Come on, come on. Okay. This looks a little better. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to change a couple things on my window configuration here. I'm on an ultra-wide screen. So when I'm broadcasting this, either I have to kind of make my windows smaller, or you guys get stuff cut off, and I don't want to get stuff cut off. So give me a second here. Actually, here's a perfect example to show you. Oh, we're still choppy, or are we okay? Sorry, I got my chat on another screen here. Oh no, come on, baby. Sorry, guys. Are we back? Okay, I think this session is just such a hog. My CPU is just getting destroyed, which is causing issues with the broadcasting software here. So I'm going to start freezing some tracks. So if you guys don't know what freeze tracks is, we're going to show you. And you can freeze up to certain inserts. All right. So, you know what? I might just have to kind of rejigger our streaming here every once in a while. So I'll keep an eye on that. If I keep looking away from the screen, I'm looking at my laptop here to see kind of what's going on with the stream. So bear with me. All right. So there's a function in Pro Tools called freeze, and basically it kind of does this like render in place, but still allows you to make volume moves and pan moves and a variety of you can still work on stuff. It's not like you're committing stuff, but it lets you free up a lot of CPU. So that's what we're going to do right now. As you can see, there's a lot of isotope nectar in this, and isotope plugins are, as much as I do love them, are a little bit can be a little bit CPU intensive when you have like 35 of them in a session. So, oh, now we're dropping audio. Oh no, I'm so sorry, guys. Check, 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 check. Let me know if we're any better. I apologize, guys. This really sucks. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on here. Stream health says it's okay, but I know you guys say it keeps dropping. So hopefully, as we go and clean up this session and get some stuff out of here, maybe that will make it a little bit more, a little easier to deal with. Anyways, I was talking about freeze tracks, and that actually just freed up a ton of CPU. I'm going to freeze a few more here, guys. So what freeze does is it basically takes a track and renders all of the plugins, renders a lot of the stuff that you've got going on that's really eating up the CPU, but it doesn't completely lock you into stuff. Like you can still adjust levels, you can unfreeze the track and change parameters on the plugins. Like it's kind of like a better way to free up CPU without actually having to print and commit the tracks. So you guys are saying it's better now. Hopefully it's better now for the rest here. So, okay. Man, I keep on having to circle back. I'm so sorry, guys. So first thing I do is I bring in my window configuration. The second thing I'm going to do is basically set this session to have all of my preferences. And as you guys know, I love SoundFlow. They've got an app called Pro Tools Preference Manager. And if you use this, you can store all of your preferences and just click a button and it will recall them all. So let's watch it do that. Magic. Okay. Now this session basically has all of my preferences that I set up, when I'm doing my mix template or when I'm restarting Pro Tools after like a reinstall or an update, or sometimes on big crashes. All of your preferences have to be reset and trashed and restarted again. So that's an amazing tool. And again, you can have different preferences. So if you've got different people using your computer, people like different things, you don't have to go in and start checking boxes all over the place. You set it once, you store it, you forget it. So if that's not an advertisement for SoundFlow, if that's not just a reason enough to get it, I don't know what is. Like, that's a pretty awesome thing. So are we good now, guys? Just put in the chat if we're good. Just give me some thumbs up. I think we're good, but I don't know for sure. And okay, awesome. Thanks, Chris. Chris Holmes, everybody. Hey, dude, awesome work on the Big Rec stuff. It sounds like, from what I've heard, it sounds incredible. One of my favorite bands. For anybody in the States who might not be familiar with Big Rec, one of my favorites. Ian Thornley, the guitar player, singer's just incredible. And Chris Holmes here in the chat is a big part of their latest record. So make sure you check it out. All right, let's dig in. So my preferences are set. There's a few other things that I like to do as well, just to clean things up a little bit. So I'm going to select all of my tracks, Option, click, selects all my tracks. I'm going to hit Command A to select all of the clips. And I have a button on my Stream Deck that is track color default and clip color default. So boom and boom. Okay, so I'm a little bit of a weirdo, if you guys haven't noticed already. Actually, I don't think we have had any audio up, but anybody who's maybe watched the URM Nail the Mix or seen any other little like videos that I've done in the past, I like working with no colors on the clips when my groups are off. So I have my colors, my preferences are set to where my colors are my groups, and they are I don't color my tracks per guitars. Like, what if they're grouped in guitars and my groups are on? Then I see, that all the instruments are grouped together. But I do that to differentiate between whether or not, to differentiate if groups are on or off. And I also like editing with black and white better. Just for whatever reason, the contrast is something I like back in the day before there was really good color in Pro Tools. The black and white was easier on my eyes to edit. And like I said, I use the black and white to give me some indication of what state some of my grouping is in. So, okay, I just want to hide their automation for a little bit. So here's a perfect example. This is a very typical session for me, for somebody to send to me. So as you can see, there's a bunch of tracks, there's audio. This kind of grayed out, those are the tracks that I froze. And obviously those are inactive tracks. I've got some tracks that aren't named, but most of them are named. Not necessarily named the way that I want them named, as you guys know, but we'll go through and talk about that in a second. So basically, the first thing I want to do before I bring in my template is I just want to clean up this session. So for instance, I don't need a click track, so I can get rid of that. So I'm going to hit my delete button on my Stream Deck, gone. Okay, I can see this is all drums. Oh, the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of all of their groups. Like, these are just named groups. Numbers. That doesn't do me any good. All right, so I'm going to delete all their groups. So I can see here, we don't even need to listen to audio. I can see that this is all drum stuff, right? Kick in and out. So let's most likely combined drums. Just looking here. This looks to be samples. You can tell because there's no leakage on anything. Yep. Snare, tom, hat, crash, kick, snare, tom, GGD, forge, battery. Yeah, those are all samples. Okay, so let's start building out our drums here a little bit. So just to make things, just kind of get the ball rolling here, I'm just going to pick all my drum kit, and I'm going to do drums. And as you guys knew from probably the first or the second video, I keep all my food groups in the drum one. I keep all my food groups in this first menu. So 1A is always drums. I'm going to follow globals. I'm just going to go have a look at what my globals are. There was some extra stuff set. I'm going to pick what I've saved to 1. This is what I like my globals to be. Okay. Okay, and now you see it's blue. Okay, there's our drums. Okay, now I've also got some more drum stuff down here, but let's deal with that as it comes here. And actually, while we're on drums, let's just go through and name this, because these names aren't going to work for me. So kick in and out. Let's just call that K. Easy. Snare, top and bottoms combined. Let's just call that S. And if you really like, if you don't like that and you want to do short form KIK, SNR, high tom, .01. Okay, we'll call that tom high, tom mid. We'll call that T mid low. So I'm just cleaning these up so they're named the way I want them to look. And again, I have a method for that madness, so it shows up in all the screens and all the scribble strips on my control surface, all that fun stuff, the way that I want. And also, it just looks cleaner. So, and then we got tom low, hats. I'm just going to reformat that. Ride, China, spot mic, kick sample. So they've included another kick sample there. So I'll call that K samp, snare sample, S samp. Overheads, OH, cymbal spots, I'll call this Sims. Room Coles, that's Rob. Well, I've got 3 room. Actually, I've got a bunch of rooms. So for now, I'll just call this room 1. And actually, you know what? I will say Coles. This is 87. I do RM for room instead of ROOM. So I'll call this room U87. Looks like this is either a distant room mic or a distorted room mic, but we'll figure that out. I'll put DIST for now. Overhead mono, that's fine. We'll put that like that. Room mono, RM mono, and it says A. I use 1 instead, which means there's probably a 2. B, yep, okay. Awesome. We're still good on the stream, guys. Sorry, I'm going to keep checking with you. It says we're good. Okay. All right. Looks like we're good. Okay. Mono 2. All right, so that's a little easier to look at for me. I'm also going to reposition a few of these things. So I'm going to put my kick sample up by my kick. Put my snare sample up by my snare. And I actually am going to change this to the way that I like it, which is just a K. And just an S. That's fine. Because if it was an in and out, I would do K in, K out. If it's snare top and bottom, I'd do S top, S bot. Just less characters. So tom high, mid low, low, hats, ride, China, overheads, cymbals. We've got an overhead mono in there that I'll probably go put up there as well. Room coal. Yep, cool. All that room stuff's together. Good. Okay, so I've also got, it looks like I've got a bunch of instrument tracks here, a bunch of inactive tracks. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all of the inactive tracks. And this is what I tell a lot of my clients or a lot of the engineers who are prepping mixes for me. If a track comes in inactive, I'm going to assume that it's not to be used. That doesn't mean I'm going to delete it right away, but I'm going to assume that it's not to be used. And because if you wanted me to hear it, you wanted me to use it, you probably wouldn't have made it inactive. That's some pretty sound logic to me. So I highly recommend you try to ingrain your clients with that, or the people that you're working with, just to get a feel for, get in the groove for that. And I already know based off of who I got the session from, and I can even just see Soldano PR, and it's this file here, and it's made up of these files, and I've got 2 Soldanos here. I know these are DIs, or these were amps that maybe he quadded a section and then he bounced it down into a stereo track. I know why he gave me these feeder tracks in case I need to go in and either reamp or rebalance or do anything. But this, he bounced out a balance that he liked with these 4 tracks. So I'm going to start with that, because he wouldn't have bounced it out that way if he didn't like it, most likely. And again, if you're a producer, and you're prepping mixes for other people, be a producer. Make some decisions. That's your job. Make some decisions. Print, decide what the amp's supposed to sound like. Print it. Decide what the 57, 421, 121, 609 U87 blend is, and print it. You can give us the feeder tracks inactive, but make a decision. That's your job. Okay. When I'm producing, I make those decisions and I print them. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I've got a button on my Stream Deck here called Hide Inactive Tracks. Boom. You guys better use that SoundFlow link because I get I don't think I get money, but I think they give me a referral there. They take something off my subscription, so it helps me keep the channel going and offsets my software costs by showing how awesome SoundFlow is. I'm kidding. Do whatever you want. I just use it because it's going to help you. Like that just got rid of all my inactive tracks, so that's awesome. So let's go through and let's just start going and cleaning up this session here. Super. I bet you that's probably a superior drummer bounce of kick and snare. All right, so let's call this. We'll call this SD for superior drummer, just for now. And actually, that's just going to be kick and snare. So I'll do K and S. Metal room. That's probably like the rooms printed from some sort of drum programming software, I'd imagine. So we'll just call this room metal. Metal kick. So we'll call this kick metal. Kick. Oh, sorry, that's snare metal. We're just cleaning these up so that way they're easy to look at and they fall in line with what the way that I like to see stuff. So you'll have a different method. Hopefully, if you've watched the first two videos that we've done, you've been thinking every waking hour of the day of why you name things a certain way, and you've figured out the best way to name it and why you name it a certain thing, and you've got your methodology figured out. So this is just mine. So we've got a metal tom, so we'll call this T metal. And the reason why I'm calling it metal is just so that way when I'm talking with the producer, if he's got changes or whatever, he's like, yeah, I want to hear more that that I gave you like a Met snare, and I'll know what that is. So I'm kind of keeping the name similar, but just formatting it so it's a lot easier. So we'll call this hats metal, crash metal. That's crash metal 1. Yep. Crash metal 2. Oops. Spelling. Hey now. Aggro kick. So kick aggro. S aggro. So what this probably is this, and I do this all the time when I'm producing, like I'll have superior drummer, battery, slate, addictive drums. I'll have like 3 or 4 different kits all triggering at the same time from the same MIDI track and just kind of blend them. And then when you get to the point where you got to start mixing this stuff and you got to start breaking it out, the best way to do this is basically just kind of what I'm doing right now or the way that he did it is solo it, print it, route it, however you want to get the stuff printed. But you got to get it out of the software somehow. So that way the mixer has, or if you're the mixer, if you're sending it off, they've got some way to kind of actually mix it, right? D forge print. So I don't know if this is, let's see what this is. It's a kick. So that's probably like a drum forge kick. So we'll call it kick forge. Battery print. Battery looks to be a snare. So we'll call that snare bat. Okay. So now we're going to go and let's go put all our kicks together. So kick metal. We're going to leave this superior drummer kick and snare on its own for now. Let's just leave that. We'll see if we need that or not. Okay, so there's a kick aggro, kick GGD, kick forge. Got lots of kick drums. Okay, let's go get all our snares. Snare, snare, snare. Toms. Tom, 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 tom. Okay, we'll put this up with our toms. And I like it, to be perfectly honest with you, I like it when people send me sessions with lots of samples to pick from. It gives me an idea of what they like. Again, they're not going to put a sample in the session that they think sounds like shit. So I like to think that people hire me because they want me to not necessarily make it sound like me, but they like what I do and they like my instincts and they like the way I hear things. So ultimately, I'm probably going to gravitate towards a certain thing, but I also like being able to see what the producer or what the tracking engineer or the artist has gravitated towards already. So if they give me really kind of tight, attacky, short kick drums, it's like, okay, well, maybe the song needs a boomy kick drum, but maybe they don't want a boomy kick drum. And that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. So if I just go instinctively, because I love boomy drums. So, okay. All right. Hat, we'll go collect all our cymbals. We've got hats, crash, and crash. We'll go put that with all of our cymbal stuff. And then I've got 2 more rooms here. And you know what I'm going to do for now? It's not really a room. I'm just going to put the SD3 kick and snare just at the end of all of this stuff. So, okay, so now I've added a bunch of tracks to my drum group. I need to basically regroup. So I'm going to select everything again, modify the group. We're going to replace all of that, hit OK. See, we're in our drum group. Just added them in there. Cool. And now all of our drums are together. Okay, step 1. Okay, so now we're just going to keep on going through the session and naming tracks. Are you guys with me so far? Everything good? Sorry, I'm just looking over here, checking the chat. Okay, cool. Let's rock and roll. I'm going to leave this drums bus. Looks like this is from a session. He's got my equal sign here, so that he probably grabbed a chain from another mix that I did for him, which is awesome. That means something's working. Okay, so I see here, and I'm actually going to show my track names. There's a trill print. That's probably trillion bass. I've got a sub bass print, and then I've got another bass that looks like it's been committed. So again, we're just going to clean up the names of this really quickly, okay? So we'll call this bass. Oh, there's another playlist with bass. That's the other thing. I don't want to say this is like something, a pet peeve of mine, but playlists. Whatever playlist is up should be the playlist you want the mixer to use. Any other playlist behind it should be any other playlist behind it. Yeah, any other playlist included should be, maybe there's an effect that you like that you printed. Maybe you printed an effect and that's what you want the mixer to use, but you also included the dry on a playlist. Maybe there's a couple different sound options just in case something's problematic. But name them with some sort of identifier, not necessarily the one that's up. For instance, like this playlist says bass 0.01. There's a playlist that's just labeled bass. The playlist that you want up should just be the name. If bass 01, let's say the playlist behind had some effect on it, name it, bass, with effects, right? And then the one that you want the mixer to use, like right off the bat, have that just be like the regular name. So we'll start with that. And for bass, I typically just use B in front of everything. So I don't know what this is yet. I'd imagine that's maybe like the clean bass or maybe like the printed live bass. This is like a trillion, probably patch, and then a sub bass. So I'm just going to assume that this is kind of like the regular bass. So I'll just leave it as B. We'll call this B trill for a trillion. We'll call this B sub. And it looks like that's all of my bass stuff. I've got a key here on my Stream Deck that toggles the track names on and off. Also very helpful. I've also got one for clip gains. All right. Okay, good. Thank you for checking. Like I said, I'm going to be checking this stream quality every 5 seconds and looking over here. So bear with me, guys. All right. Let's just go through and start naming some more stuff here. I could, my B group, you're probably asking, why didn't you group the bass? Bass, for me, as much as it would make sense to be the B group, bass is actually the C group for me because I like to have the percussion before the bass. But we're not at percussion yet. I'm sure that's probably, oh, look, that's all probably the percussion down here. Anyways, so we'll come back to the grouping. We'll just start cleaning us up a little more stuff. Okay, so this is piano. I do piano for piano. I've got an unnamed track here. Let's look at the omnisphere. Okay, so we'll just call that synth until we figure out what it's going to be. And I use the short form SYN. And then what we'll do is we'll later on, we'll listen to it and then give it a better identifier. So this is omnisphere as well. So we'll call that Syn Omni, even though the other one's omnisphere as well. It wasn't named. So, okay, now we got guitars. This is a funny name. The Guitar Stack 0.1. So I'm going to shorten that to G stack. Now that's an auxiliary input. We're going to deal with that in a couple different ways, but we're going to come back. We'll skip over that. But you guys know from the last part 1 and part 2, any sort of routing for me has a symbol, right? And so if it's a stereo auxiliary return, I like to use an equals. So we're going to put that in front of the name. Okay. So then the tracks that are feeding into that, I've got stripe 1 and stripe 2. I'm going to assume those are guitars, so we're going to name those stripe 1, G stripe. Let me put that. And the other thing, I think on the last video I showed you guys a little bit about the import session data, and there's a match tracks function. If I need to import something later on from the original mix prep session that I was given, and I've got a track that I renamed to G stripe in lower cases, and I do match tracks, and there's a track that's stripe in upper cases, it's probably going to match that track because the name's close enough. So as long as the name isn't so crazy that it's going to bug me, like I'll try to keep the name as close to what I was given as possible, as long as the characters aren't that crazy long and it's going to fit and not be confusing to look at. So, all right, moving on. A Dino high watt. So Dino may have been the guitar, high watt's the amp. Do we call it Dino or high watt? Okay, well, I'm looking at the session down here. There's a Mars Dino as well. So let's use the high watt on this, okay? So we'll call this high watt. Okay. So this Mars Dino, we're going to call this Mars. This is a routing, an auxiliary return. So we're going to put the equal sign G Mars. I've got a track that looks like it doesn't have anything on it. I'm going to put my cursor on here and do an Apple A. And if it didn't select anything. So we're just going to get rid of that track. Nothing's on it. I do that every once in a while. I'll make a track and then I won't use it and I'll just leave it in there. So it happens. Okay, so now we're getting in. Okay, yeah, so G Mars. All right, so we're going to call this G Mars 1, G Mars 2. I think we're still in guitar land here. Billy New, Billy 2, verse guitar, Viper, Soldano, print. Yeah, okay, so we'll call this G Billy 1, G Billy 2. Verse guitar add. What's the next track name? I'm verse guitar. So add might be additional. So maybe what we'll do is we'll call that G verse 1 and G verse 2. And then I'm actually going to... actually I didn't do that properly. Sorry, guys. Add is going to be G verse 2. I'm verse guitar is going to be G verse 1. And I will tell you one thing really quickly. I prefer to use the short form VRS for verse, but I'm leaving it as ERSE until we get further along in case there's any match track stuff I need to do. So, all right, looks like there's a couple prints here. We got a Viper, a Soldano. Okay, so let's just keep going down the line. We'll call this G Viper, G Soldano. I've got an octave red stripe, octave Billy, and then another auxiliary. Okay, so we'll call this G octave stripe. That's too long of a name for me, but I'll shorten it down later. G octave Billy. So we got Chris aux. Oh, we're still in guitar land. Okay, so there's a Chris octave. So equals G Chris octave 1, G Chris octave 2. Bet you guys are asking yourself why on a Friday night you guys are sitting here watching some guy name tracks in a Pro Tool session. And I'm wondering why I'm sitting here showing you. No, I love it. I love this type of stuff. Like I said, this is the kind of thing that's going to really make you question why you do certain things. And this is going through these processes is going to help you redefine your workflows and your methodology for doing things, which ultimately then when you sit down to mix is going to make you a better mixer because you're not thinking about the names of tracks. You're not thinking about whether or not something's an auxiliary or not, or if it's a guitar track or a bass. Like, just, everything that's been done because you've already done it and you've thought about it and you've basically burned it into like mental muscle memory. So, okay. All right. You guys are troopers. Okay, moving forward. Accent, ACCENT guitars. I'm assuming that's accent. There's just a space there. So I'll just call that guitar accent. Okay, looks like that's all the guitars. Reverse swell, reverse double. Actually, you know what? Those might be guitars. Let's go look at the names of these tracks. Oh, I hate when Pro Tools does that. It doesn't show you the name in the track when there's a fade. Let's just take the fade off for a second. Oh, okay, so that's a guitar swell. See, it's also a little detective work you can do. You don't even have to play it. You can just look at the audio file name and you can probably see what it is. All right, so we'll call this guitar swell 1, guitar swell 2. Okay, that's our guitars. Oh, no, there's a bend. I guarantee that's a guitar as well. Guitar bend print. Awesome. Okay, so again, just by looking, if I had to guess, these are rhythm guitars. That's a rhythm guitar. These are rhythm guitars. That's probably rhythm guitars. That's probably rhythm guitars. Those are probably rhythm guitars, although they say octave, so they might be an octave to the rhythm, obviously. Got some octave parts, but they just kind of come in and out. So these are going to be like more like probably accent and lead parts. Same with all of these. I got a bunch of questions on like why. Okay, so how do I group guitars A and B? Like I said, I always like them to fit into A or B. So this is a scenario where I don't have any acoustic guitars. These are all electrics. I can just tell by the waveform, and also I've heard the rough mix of this song, so I know it's all electrics. So now the decision is to be made is how do I split up these guitars? My initial instinct with a rock song, and again, I can't play this song for you guys, but I will tell you this is a song you'll probably hear on the radio in however many months. This is a active rock song with lots of heavy guitars. There's some accenty parts. There's a couple clean like verse parts. There's some octave parts, as we know from the naming. How I'm going to break these out is like heavy rhythms and then everything else. And why would I do that? Well, I'm anticipating down the line when I have these all routed to an auxiliary input, which is going to be, because I have one for each one of my food groups. Actually, it's going to be a routing folder, but we'll get to that. If I'm going to be doing some processing, let's say I'm going to be carving out some low mids. Let's say I'm going to be using a widener, or I'm going to be doing some like overall bus processing, subgroup or sub-bus processing just to that food group of guitars. I want it to make sense to anything that's going through it. So if I put all the heavy guitars and then I also put like the solo, and the solo's mono, and then I use a widener, it's like that's gonna kind of I use a widener on the subgroup. That's gonna fuck with the solo in a bad way. So we don't want to do that. Vice versa with some of the some of like the clean guitars, some of the octave stuff, some of the more lead stuff, the solo stuff, that's probably going to have a very different frequency range than like the heavy distorted rhythms. So there may be a point, not maybe, it's happened like probably in like 75% of the mixes I do, that I'm going to get to the end of the mix. And once you start doing final balancing and vocal and stuff like that, one of two things is going to happen with that B group of guitars, like all the lead stuff, the accent stuff, all that stuff. One of two things is going to happen. It's either going to be too bright and too mid-rangey and compete with the vocal or be a little harsh, or it's going to be the opposite. I'll have carved it out too much, made room for everything else, and then the artist or the producer or the label is going to say, hey, yeah, there's all those really cool color parts. Can we make those speak more? And that's a scenario where I can go to the subgroup, the routing folder that we're going to import from my template, and do an overall move. Like I can duck some mid-range, I can add some top end, I can add a widener to that to just give it a little bit more space. But basically, the reason we're spreading things into two guitar groups is so that way we're anticipating at some point possibly needing to add some additional processing to the subgroup. And we want to make sure we've strategically thought about what that might look like, so that way we're not putting tracks in that would ultimately not really fit. And it's Pro Tools. We can very easily regroup something and reroute something, but that's just my train of thought. I was doing a song last week that had a lot of acoustic guitar parts. It had mainly the verse was like acoustics and cleans, and then the chorus and the bridge was big rhythms and heavy stuff, and also had a lot of like really saturated lead stuff. That I also put. So that one I spread out. Excuse me. I spread out. Guitar A was all electrics, and guitar B was all acoustics. And ultimately, what I ended up doing towards the end of the mix, I ended up putting a multiband a dynamics processor on the B subgroup. So all the little pokey acoustic things kind of got pulled down a little bit, and then I could turn the whole group up so you could hear the acoustics more, and you could hear some of the chimey guitar parts that were more layered stuff and more just kind of ear candy. If I had those all mixed together, I would have had to go and do that move to like 12 tracks of chimey acoustics. And so, again, that was just kind of my thought process. Sometimes when I'm doing like country stuff, I'll use Group A for all the electric guitars, and I'll include any sort of like electric, like dobros or steel parts or any like that. And then I'll keep the B group for all the acoustics and the mandolins and the banjos and any sort of like utility type stuff. With rock stuff, most of the time, my A guitars is heavy rhythms. My B guitars is any cleans, any accent parts, any chimey parts, solos, that kind of thing. So, again, figure out what works for you. And I came to this conclusion. Well, you guys know why I only use 8 food groups is because I'm a dinosaur stuck in my old SSL ways. But the reason why I break out my guitars into A and B the way that I do, which is different per mix, is because I've experienced those, like I said on the last video, pain points, and I've remembered them. And I'm like, now when I'm setting up mixes, I'm anticipating a problem way before it happens, and I might not use any subgroup processing on these mixes at all. But if I do, at least then I'm treating similar tracks with that processing. So moving on, looks like we've got some samples. Sweep up. Yeah, this is all like sweeps. So let's just see what these are called here. Mammoth, reverse one shot, sweep. Sub drop, reverse crash. Cool. All right. So we're just going to call these sweeps. So we've already got one, sweep 1. We'll back up, sweep 2, sweep 3. There's our sub drop. So we'll call that sub drop. And rev cymbal. Boom. Okay. So all of this, all the like risers, sweeps, sub drops, boomers, all of that stuff I put into percussion. And some people would put that in the keyboards. I put it into percussion, put it wherever you want it. Just have a reason why you do it. The reason why I do it is because most of the time, that stuff is kind of sporadic, and ultimately most of the time it's atonal. And for whatever reason, my brain just associates like a sub drop and a boomer and a sweep and all that stuff. Even if it's got a little bit of tone in it, for whatever reason, my brain just associates that with percussion. So now we can start grouping again because I found all my percussion. All right, so I'm going to drag that to below the drums, and we are going to group all that stuff as percussion. Follow globals, and that's going to be in 1B. Boom. Okay. Now we can continue going. We'll group all of our bass together here. Bass. Here's the other thing. I'm very, very specific about how I'm naming my groups. I've figured out what I like. I figured out what makes sense. I figured out what I like to see. Make sure it's the exact same. And if you do it the same every time, when you import your tracks from your template, your grouping will already be done because it's going to share the same group. If the group's in the same name and the group's in the same slot, it will just automatically merge all of the groups together. So again, be very intentional about that. I don't like my keyboards next in line. I like to go to my rhythm guitar. So I'm going to grab all of my keyboards and pianos and stuff and bring them down to below the guitars. Looks like I've got a couple effects returns, which I like at the end of my session, excuse me. I'm going to drag them down there. The other thing is I actually like my master at the end of the session as well. So I'm going to take that to the bottom. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, you guys with me? Hey, Mike, how's it going? Just looking at my chat here. Good stuff. Okay, we've almost done an hour, although it wasn't really an hour because my computer kept on crapping out. But we're gonna take a quick pause here in like 5 minutes, and I'm gonna do some Q&A. So tee up your questions here. All right, let's go back and start grouping guitars. Oh, the other thing that we're gonna do is we are going to we can do one of two things with these auxiliaries. Okay, if we're going to keep the routing, so let's just have a look at the mix page here. Let's look at let's look at the guitar stack here. So Stripe. Okay, so he's got these routed to this auxiliary here as a bus. He's just doing some overall EQing and saturation, it looks like. That may sound great. Well, I mean, it does sound great because I've already heard the rough mix. Like, it does sound great. I don't want to just, like, throw that away. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to keep his treatment, but I'm going to make this a folder track, a routing folder track, and then treat that as if it was like a print. So I can go and I can basically, like, open up the folder and adjust his feeder tracks, but I'm going to make it a routing track and then just treat it as if it was one track. You'll see what I mean by that. The other thing I like to do, and this is just me being kind of OCD and anal about things, if there's an EQ that's turned off, or any insert for that matter, any plugin, I just like to get rid of it. So as I see stuff, well, you know what? I'm going to leave this one on because I did see that there was a different playlist. Remember, we were talking about that. So I'm wondering if that other playlist is actually that dark glass printed. And if so, I might want to just adjust it and reprint it. So I'm going to leave that one on. But, okay. And yeah, I'm not going to worry about those for now. But we're going to make all these guitar inputs, we're going to convert those to routing folders. Okay, so if you have an auxiliary input track, you can right-click and convert aux to routing folder. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to take anything that's routed to bus 2930, which looks like just these two, and I'm going to put it into that routing folder. Okay. And I can close that. And now I'm just going to treat this as if he just printed it that way. But if I need to open it up and break it open, I've got it. So routing folders are awesome. I did a mix the other day. Oh, Are we frozen? You guys still with me? No, I think we're good. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if we're still rocking and rolling here. I did a mix the other day for a guy who obviously recorded all of his tracks, all of his guitar tracks, and then went and either reamped himself or had somebody else reamp them. Because for every guitar part, there was at least 4 or 5 tracks. And so it would be, let's say there's like an intro guitar part. That intro guitar had a 57, a 421, a 121, and then it had like a different cabinet with a 57 and a U87 or something. But it was all the same. It was all one pass, but 5 different mics. And instead of printing a blend, which, again, producer, please produce. But the next best thing is to put all of that into a routing folder, blend it the way you want, but deliver it to me or a mixer all in the routing folder. So when I get it, I can treat it as if you made those decisions, and I'm like, cool, I got a sound here. We're ready to go. And it's all I see this as one track. This shows up as a one fader on my control surface. It shows up as one fader in Pro Tools. You have one layer check or one insert slot. You like everything's kind of set, right? But if at any point I need to go in and open this up and make some changes, I can. So routing folders are gold. And I highly recommend you guys use them for any of those scenarios where, yeah, you probably would, in another time when routing folders didn't exist, you'd probably just combine all that stuff, print it, make some decisions. So, okay, awesome. Thanks for the thumbs up, guys. Okay, we're going to continue on. So we've got our next one, Guitar Mars. I've got 2 tracks that are being fed into that. Same thing. He's just got an EQ on both of them. The other thing I could do, guys, is this. Instead of using a routing folder and keeping this auxiliary, I could just drag this EQ to both of these channels. And now the only other thing I've got to do is if there's any sort of automation, like he's got lots of automation on this. That's why I'm not going to do that. But if there was no automation on this, and the only reason that it was being routed here was to have one EQ treating both guitar parts, I could very easily just get rid of that and treat it as 2 guitar parts, right? So not going to do that though. I'll keep it as is because there's a lot of automation that is probably necessary. So, okay, let's get rid of those. All right. Okay, so those are grouped together now, and those are in a routing folder, and I can just treat that as one track. Guitar Billy 1, Billy 2, those are separate. Everything's going to its own thing. Okay, so here's something that I noticed. I've got people typically are creatures of habit, and I'd probably say the best producers and the best engineers and the best producers have or the best engineers, producers, songwriters, artists, whatever, they have a little bit of a tendency. And so if you get to a point in a session where you've seen 3 or 4 scenarios of, let's say, a pair of guitars going to an auxiliary input, being treated with a plug-in, being panned left and right, and that's a tendency that you're seeing, and then you get down to a track here where we've got Chris, we've got an auxiliary Chris. We've got Chris octave 1, Chris octave 2. One of them's being routed here. The other one isn't. I think that's probably a mistake. I think that probably wasn't supposed to be like that. So you can do one of 2 things. You can either just roll with what you got, or you can kind of fix the mistake, but maybe make a note of it, because if for some reason it's not sounding right, and whoever you're mixing for is like, yeah, or you're listening to the rough mix and you get to a spot where you're hearing that part, and you're like, something's way off. Well, then maybe that wasn't a mistake. Maybe he pulled one out of the auxiliary, for a reason. So I'm thinking that that's supposed to be in there. So I'm going to route it that way. and then drop it into that bus, or sorry, the folder. Now, the one thing that you got to be aware of is, so that was going to the master, that was going to the main out at 0 dB, and now I'm going through a bus at minus 12 dB. So this may need to be turned up 12 dB, but there's automation on it, so that's not going to happen. So anyways, we'll figure that out. I'll make a mental note of that or write it down. I always have a pen and paper handy. Just make a note. Chris Octave 2 was routed to main out, or you can put it in the comments, however you like to do it. So, okay. So now I've got that. So that's all of the guitars that are routed to auxiliaries in routing folders. So now what I want to do is I want to go through and group the guitars. So I'm going to go find all my what I think are rhythms. And like I said, this can change after you go and start working and listening to stuff. But I'm going to anticipate the Stack, the Hiwatt, the Mars, probably the Viper, the Soldano. And I'm going to put these octaves in there as well because I think those are probably heavies. And then I think these are all like, I'd say Billy's probably a rhythm and Billy 2 is also a rhythm, but I think everything else is probably an accent part, or yeah, I'd say that. So I'm gonna grab all those, put them, kind of stack them all together, and then we're gonna call that our guitar A. And like I said, I have to be very careful about like the spelling and everything of my groups, so that way when I bring in my mix template, all the grouping's already done. All right, so then this is all going to then be guitars B. Those I just have follow globals for now. These are my keyboards. And keyboards, again, keyboards is just the moniker that I'm used to. Like if they're, again, the song I was working on last week had a bunch of strings. I programmed like full on, like pretty predominant string parts. And I put strings in keyboards. Even if I went and had an orchestra done, that would go in keyboards. Anything, even like special effects. If I had sound effects, wind noises, or, you know, cityscape noises or whatever, I just, the way that my brain thinks, I throw all that stuff into keyboards. Looks like I got a tune track left over here, which is probably for like printing auto-tune, committing auto-tune. I'm going to delete that. Okay, and then we're going to get to vocals here, and I had to freeze a bunch of those tracks, as you guys know. Okay, I'm going to stop, do a couple questions. Okay. I had some really awesome advice. I've been, you know what, and actually this is a good time for me to say, by all means, if you guys have basically, I see a lot of familiar names. You guys have been with me kind of for the last 3 episodes when I started this whole thing. I invite you guys either publicly or privately to, if you guys have suggestions, if you have advice, if there's something that I'm doing in this, you know, technically that's not working for you guys, obviously, you know, if the stream's crapping out, that's a problem. I'll figure that one out. I think it was because the session was bogged down. I could barely get Pro Tools to like open and close the session. But anyways, I'm an open book, so definitely please give me your feedback. Be gentle, but be gentle. But be honest. And anyways, I did get some advice about kind of how to operate a little bit of the broadcast the other day by a good friend, and I appreciate that. But I am going to bring up the chat here just because of the earlier problems. The chat had some issues on my screen. So anyways, here we go. Going back. Hang on, guys. I missed a really big part. You wouldn't believe me, but I actually have a checklist for this. And my checklist is, again, I modify my checklist all the time. I'm not looking at my checklist right now because I'm juggling, you know, the streaming and everything right now. But the very, 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 very first thing on the checklist is saving this session as something else. As soon as you get it, as soon as you open the session they give you, you should do a save as. So as soon as I got this, I renamed this basically just the acronym, and I called it for mix because it was named something else. How I typically do it is I'll have the name of the song, and I like to put in square brackets mix, and then I'll do I'll have one that's called mix prep. I'll have one that's called setup. I'll have one that's called template. I'll have one that's mix ready, and then once I make it through all of those, then I start numbering them 0, 1.1, whatever. But the point is, however you do it, come up with a system. The point is, if you ever need to get back to the mix that they sent you or the session that they sent you with none of your changes, you need to have that available to you at all times. So please, please, please don't go do a bunch of stuff in the session and then save over and just hit Apple S and save over what they sent you. Do not do that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. But anyways, make sure you're saving. Okay, we're going to the chat. All right, guys. Any questions? Any questions on anything so far? Mike, don't kill me. I'm pulling up the chat. Any questions? Chris, when you're delivered 4 microphones for guitar instead of a sum, how often do you find the most of the extra mics are not needed? And can you just choose one? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Paul DeCarly, what's going on, buddy? Yeah, there's been a lot of times where I'll just drop stuff. So that session that I was talking about last week or a couple of weeks ago that I did where I had like 6 mics because there was 2 cabinets. One had 3 mics on it. The other had 3 mics on it. I find when you're using too many mics, you get to a point when you start combining them, everything just starts kind of sounding undefined, even if they're in phase. Like you can do this with IRs, same thing. Even if you're using IR and everything's loaded properly, and everything's aligned or using the auto align, it just starts sounding a little undefined. And so what I'll do is I'll just literally pull up whatever I've got, and it's nice to have a control surface to do this, and I'll just start moving faders, right, on the control surface. And you'll very quickly find a blend that you like. And then whatever's kind of low in the blend, or if you can't get a blend that you like, that's when you start muting stuff. And if you find one that's like really, really, really low, and you're like, I don't even know if I hear that, try turning it on and off, and if you don't hear it, get rid of it, because it's just going to be eating up garbage space and you don't need it. So, yeah, absolutely. I would say probably half the time, not all of the mics are needed. And again, like I've preached many, many, many times, like have purpose and intent to everything that you do. So if you are balancing 4 mics, don't just put them, like, I mean, yeah, you can just be creative, like I was talking about, and balance some mics and you're going to stumble upon something, but find which mic you like best and start with just that. And then determine, that will, just the 57's too thin. Well, then listen to the other mics and find out what would help fill it out and make it a little more full. And then blend that one in and be like, cool, you happy with that? Yeah, you know what? It's missing a little bit of really kind of high-end top. Okay, well, see if there's something else that adds that. Just have a purpose. Because if you're just pushing up everything, at least in my experience, it just starts getting very kind of washy and undefined. So hopefully that answers your question. Paul DeCarly, why do Canadians make such great producers and engineers? Good fucking question. I've asked myself the same thing. I wasn't talking about myself. I was talking about all of my, just like all of the people, not all of them, but a lot of the engineers and the producers that have made my favorite albums were Canadian. And that wasn't like, oh, they were Canadian, that's why I liked them. It was like I found out like 10 years after the fact that they're Canadian. So I don't know. Paul, you should be able to answer that question better than me. You've worked with every single one of them. Paul DeCarly in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, is record-making royalty in my book. So, good question. Mauricio from Brazil, here to congratulate you on Scott Stapp's mixes. Thank you. I appreciate that, man. That's awesome. I was a big Creed fan when I was a teenager, and love him or hate him, it's pretty cool to get to work with Scott, and I'm loving that a lot of his stuff that we've been working on, that at least that I've mixed, is actually pretty heavy, so it's fun. But anyways, yeah, thank you very much for the kind words. John, what do you do when you are sent a session with plugins you don't have? Okay, good question. So there's actually a scenario in this session that we'll get to in a second. So when I loaded this session in Pro Tools, it tells you if you don't have a plugin, right? And you make note of it, or I think you can get a detailed report or whatever they call it. But you can do one of two things. You can get the trial if you haven't already done a demo, but you can get the demo and use the demo for while you need it. There's a lot of well, not a lot. Let's say this. UAD plugins, a lot of the UAD plugins are available with other developers, and they were basically like ported to the UAD platform. And so the one that I'm going to show you today is a plugin called an SPL Vitalizer, which is basically a emulation of a hardware unit. And this producer has that on their UAD system. I don't have it on my UAD system because I have it from Plugin Alliance. And it's exactly the same plugin. I've done ABs, I've phase canceled stuff. Like it's the same. So what I'll do is I'll swap that out. And the nice thing about the UAD plugins is when you open them up and you don't have them, it shows you the settings as it was saved. So I can copy all the settings down to the Plugin Alliance one. The other thing I'll do is I'll the minute that I get the session, I'll open it up. Even if I'm not going to prep it that day, the minute somebody sends me a session, either me or one of my assistants will open it up. And if there's any plugins I don't have, we'll reach out to the producer or the engineer or the artist, whoever sent us the mix, and immediately say, hey, what are these plugins doing? And are they necessary? And sometimes it's like, oh no, don't worry about that. I was just using, that, esoteric limiter just to kind of level some stuff out, just throw an L1 on it or something. Other times it's like, oh yeah, that's a guitar amp sim that's part of the entire sound of the record. And at that point, I'll either request that they print it, or if it's a project where it's like song 1 of 12 and I'm going to be mixing the whole album, then I'll just buy it if they're going to be using it over and over and over again. That's one of the reasons why I have literally almost 2,000 plugins, is because there's been a lot of those scenarios where I'm just like, I'll just buy it, and even if I never use it again. If I find if one guy is using it for everything, or he's using it a lot, or really likes it, there's probably a few other people in my sphere that also either are currently using it or will in the near future. So yeah. So yeah, you can do one. Yeah, like buy the plugin, demo it, get the producer to print it, or inquire of what is it doing. Sometimes I've even gotten a screenshot. Like it's been an EQ. They're like, oh, I'm just EQing it. Send me a screenshot. I can rebuild it with a Fab filter or an EQ7 or whatever else. So hopefully that answers that. Any other questions before I get back to the session here? Yay, nay. Have a drink of my carbonated beverage. Okay. I'm going to have, man, look at that. Chris Holmes and Paul DeCarli. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. I would like to do a live stream, one episode where obviously separate. I would love to have you guys on and we can talk shop. Because like I said, Chris is an awesome engineer and producer in his own right. And Paul is basically he's taught me more about Pro Tools than I can ever teach you guys. So I would love to get you guys on the show, or some sort of forum that we can talk shop, and you guys can really give the viewers some value instead of the bullshit that I'm spewing. All right. Okay, I don't see any action in there. Thumbs up, we're still good? If there's no questions, I'll get back to the session here. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Don't leave me hanging. High five. Thumbs up. Tell me to piss off. Just do something so I know we're still live. Anybody. All right, I'm going to get back to it. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tom. All right, back to the session. All right, I didn't forget to switch over to my session to my screen here this time. Okay, we're going to jump to vocals, and we're going to move through this pretty fast. There might be some stuff that I'm not grouping together properly, but I think we're going to be okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go through and just rename some of this stuff really quickly. Filter vocals. So I'm going to call that V. I like to start my track names with kind of a lowercase letter of whatever it is, and I'll just call this filter. V filter. Lead verse. I'll call that V verse. VRS is how I like it. V double. That looks like a verse double, so I'm going to call that V verse double. Looks like we've got a triple here. Okay, so we will call that. It's also a verse. V verse triple. Okay, and now we're in, what is this? Lead vocal 2. Let's get rid of that. Lead verse. So this looks like it's coming out of the chorus. Lead V2. All right, well, let's just do this V lead 2. Easy. For now, can always change it later. V double 2, V triple 2. Okay. All right, let's go get our chorus leads. Chorus main. Chorus main comp 01. We're going to call that VCHR. And then we're going to have a double, VCHR double, VCHR triple, VCHR quad. I love quadded vocals. V chorus low V. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. I think we're getting into background vocals there. Low is probably a low octave. And chant, that looks like it's also a background. Low vocal, ad-lib takes. Ad-libs I usually put with leads. So I'm actually going to bring that up here, and I'll call that V ad-libs. Okay. All right, let's go collect all of what I think are all of my lead vocals. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, I've got break vocals there. Okay, it looks here. These are all routed to this auxiliary input. So what are we going to do with that? It looks like it's all being treated with one thing. Yep, it is. Okay, so we're going to treat that as a routing folder, kind of like we did with the guitars. So we're going to use our little equal symbol. We'll do a V, and we'll call it break, BRK. Okay, and held is the name of the track. So we'll do V held 1. V held 2, V held 3, and then these look like they are like delays of some sort. So we'll just call this V held 5 and 6, or sorry, 4 and 5 for now, and then we'll go back and listen to them. But they look like they're part of this. Okay, and they're all routed there. Excellent. So we're going to convert that to a routing folder. Okay, and then we're going to drag that into there. Okay, excellent. And then I like to order my vocals kind of in the order, kind of like the song arrangement. So, although the song starts with a chorus, I'm not going to put the chorus vocals there. I'm going to start with the verse, and then then the chorus, and then we're going to get to, there was that kind of second set of, leads. That it looks like it's probably just like a tagline. So I might end up labeling that V tag. And then we've got our ad-libs and we got our break vocals. Okay, so that's all our lead vocals right there. So I'm going to group all those as lead vocals. Come on. You can do it. Pro Tools. Okay. All right, just checking the stream health. Okay, lead vocals. And okay, so that means all of these are most likely background vocals, but we're going to clean up the names. And for background vocals, instead of using the V, I use a BG background. Okay, so we're going to call this, instead of chorus low vocal 1.01, we're going to call this BG chorus low 1. And you can see how I kind of shorten that down, right? So then we got, we'll do 2. BG, this one's called end chant low. So we'll call this BG end low 1. And I'm copying and pasting so I don't have to retype it again. Low vocal left. So we'll call this BG low 1. Copy, paste 2. Okay, and then we got harms. Harm 1, 2, 3, 4, and that looks like they kind of go throughout the song. They're not just choruses, so we'll just name them harms. And I shorten harm to HRM. So we're just going to go 1 through 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then it looks like we've got another auxiliary input, but it's frozen right now, so I'm not going to be able to change that yet, but I will. And then it looks like all of these vamps are going to it. I've got some vamps here that aren't named, so we're going to just, let's name those first. We'll call this, yeah, it looks like they're all vamps, even though there's a high differentiator. So there might be some like low octaves in here somewhere that aren't named, but for now we'll just call them BG vamp with the equals because it's a routing track, and then we'll call this, we'll just do BG vamp 1 through however many there are for now. Then we can always differentiate them once we hear them. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna do a save. I'm gonna unfreeze the routing folder here. Hopefully we don't crash again. Why did those guys freeze? You know, it's interesting. These aren't. So those were muted. I thought they were frozen, but then I saw the plugin was active here, and I'm like, those aren't muted, or those aren't frozen. These were just turned off. So that would be a question that I would just shoot the producer an email and be like, or a text and be like, hey, the BG low towards the end of the song, all those the tracks were active. There's a plugin on it, the whole thing, but the regions were muted. Obviously, if they weren't used, probably not going to be using them. I'll just make them inactive, hide them and make them inactive. Okay, let's unfreeze this. Okay, if the stream goes down, don't leave. I'll be back. But let's see if we can unfreeze this. Yeah, right. Cool. All right, we're going to convert this to a routing folder. Convert to routing folder. That's actually something. Oh, I did put a button there. For a long time, I didn't have a button on my Stream Deck for that. Now I do, and I forgot to drill it into muscle memory. Okay, so let's put all the vamps into that routing folder. Make sure they're all routed there. Looks good. Close that folder. And now we're going to group all of these together. Those are all my background vocals. And for that, I do capital B, lowercase g, vocals. All right. Okay. This is looking good. Way better. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and have a look at like all the plugin scenario and the send scenario. So doesn't look like I have any sends on anything except for the vocals. And the vocals, and that's what these two returns are. So what I'm going to do with that is, like I said, the rough mix sounds awesome. And when I got this, it sounded great. I loved the vocal treatment. I don't want to have to redo it. So I'm going to incorporate his his effects sends and his effects returns into my template, but I'm just going to format it so it's easier for me to work with and everything's kind of the way it is. Another really just like nitpicky thing, this doesn't really matter, but I hate looking at like these input labels when there's no input, or like if the input's grayed out because I don't have it. I hate looking at those, so I'm just going to go and set all these out to no inputs. This is just total OCD, neurosis, whatever you want to call it. Being neurotic. You do not have to do it. Just make sure you don't do it to the any sort of routing stuff because you need those inputs, right? But none of this stuff. I don't need any of this stuff. Oh, can't change it because it's frozen. That's fine. Do all the other ones. Okay. This is probably not going to let me do it either because it's frozen, right? Yeah. Okay. Fine. No problem. Okay. So plugins. There's a lot of plugins. I've frozen a bunch. I don't think all of these plugins are probably necessary, but I'm going to leave them on for now. And then once we start mixing, then I will kind of determine what I can take off and what I don't need and that type of thing. I did mention like any stuff that's grayed out or not in use. I typically like to get rid of. And then the other thing that I do, depending on how many plugins there actually are in this session, sometimes what I like to do is I'll bring all of the plugins that I was sent. I'll drag them down into inserts F and J, and because all of my inserts typically live in A to E, and that way, if I'm going to use their inserts, I can, and if I'm not, I can turn them off. But I can still have them live there in case for some reason the producer or artist comes back and says, "Hey, I really like that thing I had going on. Did you get rid of it?" Yeah. But still here, I can turn it back on. The other thing you can do is you can import from the original session that they sent you. So in this scenario, I'm just going to clean up some of these inserts. I'm not going to drag them down to F and J. I'm just going to kind of clean up some of this stuff. So I've got an auto tune on this guitar, and I'm going to open it up, and it's got automation on. You can tell it because that's orange. So I'm going to leave those on, but I may actually commit those just so they're not running live. Drum stuff. We'll leave that for now. Okay. Okay, we're going to start bringing in the template. And yeah, let's do this. Okay, so I just go to the very bottom of the track, and I'm going to bring in every track that's in my template, okay? So I'm going to import session data, and I'm going to bring in the one without plugins for now, okay? And I'm just going to select all. I'll import everything. Actually, I don't think there's anything on any playlist. So, but I'm going to add all the data except for clips and media, although I think the session's empty. But you can see I've selected everything. Might not use everything, but I'm going to bring everything in because everything's grouped, everything's labeled, everything's colored, everything's set the way that I want it. And so let's bring all that in and then go from there. Okay, this is going to take a second. Any quick questions in the meantime? Nope. Okay. If you keep on seeing me look away, I'm looking at my laptop, which I've got the chat on. So, oh, look at that. There we go. Love that. Send to Avid. Yeah, right. Come on, guys. Okay, well. It's bound to happen, right? Wait for Pro Tools to load. How long does it take you to typically for you to set up a song for mixing from prep to completion of this stage? So there's a few more steps in the kind of the prep. To get it to where I've basically get the tracks from a client and it gets into my template to where like I can put it up and like it's formatted properly, but it doesn't have any additional stuff like if I need to cut triggers or if I need to do any sort of like Midi for like a trigger like a sub synth on the Midi for the bass, any of that type of stuff, just to get it formatted into my template. Typically not like it's typically not that long. Like I can if it like in a session like this where it's like you've got to go through and rename some tracks and you've got to go through and kind of figure out what a few tracks are and you've got to group stuff and doing that kind of thing. I don't know, maybe half hour, 45 minutes. Obviously it's taking longer just because like I'm going through it and talking about it while I'm doing it, but it's like I can blow through it pretty fast. Cutting triggers and getting the MIDI done properly for the bass, and then if I want certain plugin chains brought in, if I want certain effects and plugins set up, there's like a few other steps that are very very specific to kind of my mix process, not just like getting their session formatted for me to be in my template. That takes a little bit longer. Maybe another hour, maybe two, depending on what the MIDI bass situation's like, depending on what the drum triggers are like. If it's double bass top to bottom triplets, then you're going to be cutting a lot of drum tracks and like having to go through and clean stuff up, and lining up the MIDI can sometimes be a pain in the butt. So it kind of depends, but to get it to this stage, like what we're going to basically get it to by the end of this episode, I'd say anywhere between maybe like a half hour and an hour, depending on how messy the session is. So, okay, let's see if I'm back up. All right. So I think in order to get the live stream a little smoother for you guys, it's introduced a pretty big delay with the chat. So, sorry, it says please go into the MIDI bass and trigger layering too in the next episode. Yeah, I'll definitely go into that. I'll do kind of like the next level of this. I'll probably yeah, you know what? I'll just do that in a part 4. I was going to do kind of like a more of like an editing or kind of drum specific episode, but maybe I'll just do that. I'll do a part 4 to this and really take it all the way to where I'm mixing. So good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, let's get back to the Pro Tools here. Let's see if I can get my session to not crash. Oh, hang on one second. I got to do one thing, guys, because we are all right. Sorry, I just had to change a setting here. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to freeze all of these plugins. Okay. I'm going to freeze all of these guys. Let's see, is this ozone imager needed? Okay, I'm going to freeze these. And the cool thing about freeze is you can freeze up to a certain insert, so that way you can still tweak some of the other inserts. For instance, this auto tune, it's automated on, like it's probably it needs to be on. But the SSL EQ, I might want to tweak that. I'm probably not going to tweak the auto tune if it's on for a reason, right? So I can freeze up to the insert. You can also commit up to that insert as well. But so stand by on the freezing. Freeze, 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 freeze. Anybody know any good jokes? Why did I ask? I find amp sims, tuning, saturation, and then like uber do it all effects like ozone and nectar and like stuff like that to be pretty resource intensive. Okay, so this ozone imager is not being used, so I'm going to get rid of that just to free up some space here. When I say space, I mean CPU power here. All right. I could probably keep a lot of this other stuff going here. I'm going to freeze all these vocals for now, too. This is what's really killing us, I think. Yeah, let's do that. Freeze. Freeze tracks. Okay, we're gonna have a few seconds here. Any questions in the Q&A? Can be about anything. I'll give us a 5-minute free for all. Okay, I don't know if Chris Holmes, are you still here? I want to ask you a question. What, if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot. What you asked the question about guitar mics. What mics were you guys using on the Big Wreck album? Oh, I've got here Jordan. Any other SoundFlow packages, macros that you feel are a must-have? Any SoundFlow that are a must-have packages? I go through about once a month and just like add everything, and I try one day a week to have maybe a couple hours where I just kind of research like new tools and stuff like that. So every once in a while, I will go in and really look at what those are. But the Pro Tools preference, the preference recaller is a must. A lot of people have made some packages like the Melodyne, the Vocal Line package are just like, I mean, they're nothing tricky in there, but they're just, it's already done for you. The Andrew Sheps Bounce Factory is awesome if you do have to go down that road. Man, I'm trying to think of what other ones. I mean, I've programmed quite a few myself. But mine are just very basic. Like, I should probably go. I'm due to have another peek. Definitely due to have another peek at kind of what the new ones are. So. Well, Chris either left us or he's either being shy or he doesn't want to share. Son of a gun. Making awesome sounding records and not telling us how he's doing it. What a guy. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right. We're going to try bringing in my template again. See if we can get a little further this time. Actually, you know what? I'm going to freeze one more thing here. Freeze. All right. Take 2. I feel like tonight's been like take 12. Sorry for all the technical hiccups. I mean, this is probably indicative of my life in terms of just Pro Tools and all the stuff that goes with it. But, you know, that's why this is live, man. Real life. We're not editing around we're not making this look better than it actually is. This is just we're in the trenches. It's as real as it gets. Oh. Okay. Don't crash. Don't crash. Don't crash. Don't crash. Does anybody else find themselves get slightly anxious when doing certain things in Pro Tools? Wow. Something's in my template that this session does not like. All right, well, we'll do this another way. I am going to save that log because I think there might be something in there that gives me some indication of what's what. So, all right. Going back to the chat. Do you think Ozone 8 on the master is giving you problems? Oh, fucking right it is. Freeze always makes you anxious. Oh no, freeze makes things way better. It always just gets everything running smooth again. IZotope. IZotope, as much as I love the plugins, it has a lot of system compatibility problems. I've got a brand new Mac Studio computer sitting on that table, and it's been sitting there for a year. And the reason I can't use it yet is basically because of problems with iZotope. I have too many clients that rely on iZotope. As you can see in this, Nectar and Ozone specifically. I have a lot of clients who use the vocal synth. I have a lot of clients who use what's the other one? Neutron. Yeah. I think it may be any of my old system doesn't like freezing more than one track at a time. Oh, gotcha. Like adding tracks. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's like I'll do certain things in Pro Tools and I'll just get anxious, being like, is this gonna work? Yeah. Okay. Take 9. Okay, here's what I'm going to show you guys a little. I will show you guys a little workaround here. I mean, it might be a workaround, maybe not. We'll see. I'm reloading here. JR, you were asking about Ozone 8. It like I said, it absolutely could be Ozone. I mean, I've been mixing other sessions with Ozone 8 on it for a while, but you could absolutely be right. That's probably the first place that my brain would go to. It's interesting that it's crashing when I'm bringing stuff in, though. I'm actually just looking at the log real quick while Pro Tools is loading. All right. We're going to go do something really quickly. I'm going to show you guys a workaround. I'm going to grab... So remember we made a bunch of tracks inactive? Actually, JR, let's try your suggestion for a second. I'm just going to lose this entire master bus for now, and then I can always bring it back in later. I'm just going to get rid of this whole thing. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to put the inserts to nothing. So I've got a I don't know if you guys can see this because I'm at the very end of my session. I'm going to go back to the other page. I've got a track preset saved in your utility that clears inserts. No inserts. There we go. All right, let's try this. And I'm going to get rid of that guy. Maybe it has something to do with that. All right, we'll try this one more time. And then if it crashes, then what I'll do is the workaround is instead of trying to bring my template into this, I'm going to use my template, make a new session from the template, and then I'm going to bring all the tracks that I'm using from this into that. That's the workaround. And that also, I don't know if Paul's still on, but that used to be the way that you would deal with a corrupt session. I don't know if that's still like the best way to do that or not, but yeah. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try putting my template way up at the top here. See what happens. All right. Template. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to leave my headphone out. That's got the I think the Sonar Works plugin on it. Maybe that's causing an issue too. I don't know. All right, let's just have a peek, make sure we're getting everything we need. Yes, yes, yes. Icon, custom fader groups. I don't know. Okay, go. Cross your fingers, cross your toes. Bet you guys have never seen Pro Tools look like that before. I don't think I've seen Pro Tools look like that before. JR, Pro Tools has performance anxiety. Works better when you're not doing a live stream with a bunch of people on it. Damn you, Pro Tools! Holy shit, it might have just worked. JR, man, I think it was Ozone, or it might have been that master fader, or it might have been that headphone amp output I had on it. The plugin, the Sonar Works plugin. I find sometimes that's a little weird too, and most of the time I'm not using it. It's just there for like another just kind of monitor check. But anyways, if you guys watched episode 2 a couple weeks ago, all these tracks should look familiar to you. All of these groups in the order that I made them and with the naming and everything, all of this stuff should look very familiar. So here's what we're going to do. Let's start formatting. Okay. So let's grab all of the, let's just go up to the top here. Okay. So the first thing is I've got all my drum subgroups: kick, snare, toms, cymbals, which is like overheads and spot mics and all that shit, and rooms, right? So let's just start formatting this stuff. And somebody asked me how long certain things take. Somebody's asking something. Oh, Wes, hold tight. I'm going to answer that question in a little bit, okay? Right at the end. Okay. Let's see how quickly we can kind of get this stuff formatted in my session. It's 8:54. Here we go. Ready? I'm just going to blow through. Okay, kick. Okay, go put them up next to the kick. I'm actually just going to turn my groups off for now. Let's go get all the snares. Dun, dun, dun. Let's go put the snares next to the snares. I feel like I'm on that TV show where it's like you go shopping and you got to like go fill up the shopping cart as fast as you can. I feel like I'm like in some sort of weird race right now where I'm just going back and forth. Go, 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 go. Hats, crashes. Yes, all of that. Just FYI, this drum setup is a little atypical. So this is definitely a scenario of like programmed drums, and then after the fact, when all the sounds are kind of like everybody likes them, and then it's like, okay, now we track drums, but we still need to make the we still want to keep all like the all the sample sounds as well. So typically there's not this many tracks. That's fine. Is what it is. Ultimately, once we get everything formatted, we're going to be able to collapse this session down into like 8 folder tracks, no matter how many tracks are in here. And if you've got 35 kick drums, you're just going to be looking at 1 folder track. That's the beauty of doing it this way, is being able to really compartmentalize the whole session, not only from like a mix standpoint, but then also from an organizational and a workflow standpoint, to where it's like you can have. I literally maxed out Pro Tools the other day. I haven't maxed out Pro Tools in a long time. Like, I ran out of voices, and if you looked at that session, it wouldn't look any different than a session that had 24 tracks in it. Once you collapse everything down. So right now, all I'm doing is putting all of the tracks that I got in the session into the proper spot. And here's a quick tip: if you turn groups on and you just hit the cursor in any of the timeline of that group, it will highlight all those tracks for you. So it's a quick way to grab them all. Except I didn't want to put them there. I wanted to put them up here. There we go. Okay. Grab these guys. These are going into B. What time did I say we started this? 8:54. Okay. Go, 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 go. Come on. Go faster. Go faster. Go faster. Oh, remind me to bring all those drums up as well, because they've got some stuff on the drum bus that I'm going to want to copy over to my drum bus. All right, we're almost there. Come on, man. All right. Okay, so now we're going to go over to mix page. Okay, so now what we got to do, and this is going to be familiar from the previous video that we did, where I'm going to show you kind of how I group all this stuff together. So we're going to select all the kicks. They're already in a drum group, but this is where I want to put all the kicks together. And in my second menu here, you see I've got all my kicks. I'm going to add those to my 2 template tracks. I've got a mono and a stereo template track that we talked about in the last 2 videos, right? So now those are all grouped together. Now I'm going to click on my template track to select the output while holding Option Shift, and I just got to find the check mark, and it's going to put them all there. And then I'm going to come back to do the effect sends, okay? So now let's just go do this to the snares as well. Okay, group, snare, replace or add, Option Shift, find the check mark, boom. When I say find the check mark, I'm selecting the output on my template track for the snares, because it's already set to the right spot. So all I have to do is just find that check mark and hit it again, and it'll make everything else that's selected do the same thing. So okay, boom, 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 boom. Sorry, you guys can't see that IO menu, but it popped up. Trust me. Replace or add. Sometimes it says replace, sometimes it says add. I don't know what the differentiating factor is there, but okay. Keep going, keep going. Where's our room stuff? Right here. Boom. Boom. And I'm going to put that, for now, I'm just going to put that that kick and snare print in with the rooms. Although I know it's not a room, I'm just going to put it there for now. I probably am not going to use it, is probably why I'm putting it there. But, okay, those are grouped. Rooms. Okay. I'm just doing a couple, Couple checks here. All right, so any tracks that don't have sends, I want to have sends, put sends on them. So I've got a track preset for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my drums by clicking the little dot over by my drum group. And now I'm just going to go through and unselect my template tracks that already have the sends already set up. Just going to deselect those. I'm going to do a quick save because I'm nervous. Okay. And I want to add sends to all of these. So I've got a track preset already set up for this. And I'm going to use this menu instead of my button on my Stream Deck so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go and select sends, effects sends, and click go. And this is going to take a second, but it's a pretty powerful thing, these track presets. So build your own track presets for whatever various scenarios you might run into often. I run into scenarios where I want to add all of my stock sends to just a whack of tracks. So right now, Pro Tools isn't frozen. It's actually adding sends in a very slow manner. Come on. Come on. You can do it. Wes, I'm going to answer your question, but the minute I start answering your question, I know the sends are going to pop up, and then I'm going to have to defer till later. So I will answer it, though. So hold tight. This one's going to run a little bit later because of Pro Tools tonight, unfortunately. Pro Tools might just not like me tonight. Oh, there it is. Wow. That magic trick only took 4 minutes, but it happened. Okay, so there we go. Now all my sends are there. The only problem is there's a little bug with with these track presets where it fucks with your your pans. So you got to go reset all your pans. I do have a way to do this. What I'll do is before I do a batch send preset, I'll do a save as, and then what I'll do is I'll just I'll do a match tracks, import all of my pans for the entire session back to what it was. So I don't have to do what I'm doing right now. Okay. A few more. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so here we go. So now I want to put my kick comp on all of those. I might not use the kick comp, but I want to put it there just in case. Okay, we'll put our snare comp, same thing. So I'm selecting the one on my template track, just finding the check mark and hitting it. Don't have to worry about even what that menu says. I'm just finding the little check mark. Sorry, you can't see the check mark. My big noggin was in your way here. I'm going to switch to main screen only so that way you guys aren't losing any windows. Find the check mark. So for those of you who don't know what this send is, this is basically for parallel compression. I've got a parallel line set up on every one of the kick, snare, toms, cymbals, and room. That it's not active right now, but it's there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my drums, and I'm going to turn that off because I'm actually not using it. But if I want to use it, it's already set up, ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my template tracks. I'm going to make those inactive. Boom, boom. Make it active. Okay. I've got a kick key set up, which I will put on my kick and turn on. I've got a snare key, which I will put onto my snare and I will turn on. And that's for like triggering various things, side chaining. And now I'm going to go start throwing this stuff into the folders. So there we go. Kicks are all in the folder. And this is a good time to double check my routing. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Throw all the snares stuff into the snare folder. Double check the routing. Collapse it. Toms. Collapse it. Double check all the routing, symbols. Collapse that down. All our room stuff. I'm actually going to mute that Superior Drummer thing for now. And this all looks good. Room bus. Rooms. And then I'm going to grab all of that. Dump it into the drums. Collapse the drums down. Okay. That's done. Okay. Just to save time, I'm going to go and group everything else, and then we'll come back and do the sends afterwards, because the sends take a second. So, all right. Moving on. So that basically brought all of our drums. That's our drums right there. Okay. The other thing we could do is, I mean, we'll do this at the end, but we can get, once we start getting rid of like lines that I'm not using, like I'm not right now anticipating using these parallel lines, so I can hide those. So I can hide all those, right? Now this is even cleaner. Like that's our drums right there, right? So let's open up this. Let's get rid of, we'll get rid of these inactive guys too. I could probably just do hide inactive, but I might have a few other inactive tracks down low that I don't want to get rid of quite yet, obviously. So I can hide those. So now this is even cleaner. That's all our drums. Once we get a little bit of a balance, and there already is a little bit of a balance because this is the rough mix. So all of these kicks are going to be balanced the way they were on the rough mix. I've basically brought, like, that's a lot of drum tracks. Now I've got one fader for my kick, and I can use an EQ and compression, and I can almost treat this as like a five tracks of drums, and probably be halfway to like a pretty good mixed sound. So, all right. Let's blow through the other stuff, and then we'll come back. I'll do the sends afterwards. So this is going to be redundant, but just hold with me here, okay? We're on the percussion now. So we're going to group all our percussion together. It's already grouped because we named it the same. That's good. Okay, so we can just confirm that. We're just going to do our percussion bus output. Just find the check mark. And then we can dump that all into the percussion bus. And for now, we will collapse that. Okay, now let's check our bass. Looks like our bass is already grouped, and I just turned all the groups on. I suspend groups all the time. That's my quick way of turning groups on and off. I very rarely turn groups on and off over in the corner here. Very rarely. So suspend groups is Shift Command G. I'm always turning that on and off. But when you turn it on, you can see all these are purple and they all say bass. That's how I know they're all grouped together. So I don't have to do any more grouping here. But what I do need to do is set my outputs, but I'm not going to include that MIDI track. Okay. Let's go down here. Sorry guys, my noggin's blocking the, oh no, it's not. Okay, good. Okay, and then we can throw all of that into the folder. We'll come back and do the sends later. Okay, now we got all the guitars. We can see that they're grouped. We don't even need to open and modify any grouping because we named them properly when we were cleaning up the initial session. Set the output. Okay. Dump them in to the folder. We'll collapse that down. Now we're on guitars B. Looks like we are all grouped there as well. Set the output. Put it in the folder. Keyboards. Our grouping's already done because we did it properly. Set our output. Throw our keys in. We're on to lead vocals. We're going to do something a little different with the sends here because they've already got sends set up and we don't want to mess with that because there could be a bunch of automation. There's levels are set. Like, just if they've got groups or if they've got sends already set up, don't waste time trying to recreate them. Just work with them. So we just set our outputs here. We'll come back and deal with our sends later. Collapse that folder. Backgrounds are grouped properly. We can see that already. We've got visual indication. Find the check mark for our output. into the folder. Boom. Okay, so the other thing we're going to do, as I mentioned, bringing this drum sub back up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a peek at their. So this track here was the drum subgroup that they sent, and you can see there's 2 plugins on it. There's no automation, but the fader is at +3. So what I'm going to do to use this as a starting point is I'm going to drag the plugins that they have over onto my drum bus, and I'll turn it up. Oops. We're going to mute my compressed parallel for now. And now I can get rid of that. So I just basically matched my drum subgroup to what they had sent in their session. Because like I said, I want to build off of what they've already got, because it already sounds pretty good. Okay. So now let's scroll down and see what else we got. So their master, I'm going to make that inactive for now. There might be some automation in here that we want to follow, and we also got rid of their master bus plugins. I might bring those plugins back in and put them on my my master fader here instead. And then the other thing that they have is they've already got 2 sends here that we're liking. So what I'm going to do is same with how we do our other grouping, is I'm going to bring these, select them all. I'm going to modify my group. I'm going to find my effects, which I think are in number 4 here. Yep. So there's all my effects. I'm going to add these 2. I'm going to rename them so they've got my little effects symbol in front of them. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'll do an effects AMS, and I'll do effects capital. And then I also want to make the color the same here. So. And lastly, we also have to select the proper output. So find the check mark, boom. So now their effects are basically grouped. The routing to my outputs is set, and I've colored them the same, and they're basically like part of my template now, right? Okay. So let's go have a look at this session now. Let's get rid of our parallel subgroups that I'm not going to probably use for this. Except for the drums. I always use the parallel for the drums, but those are all inactive. Okay, so we started that at 8:54. It's 9:13, so that was 20 minutes with... We had to wait for 5 minutes for all the effect sends to pull up, right? And so that we still have to do that. So if I expand all of these folders, I need to go through and select all the tracks that don't have sends set up on them that I want to be formatted for my session. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm not going to do the vocals because I don't want to override their stuff. We're just going to have to do that kind of manually. But I'll do a save, and then I will do a recall track preset. And I'll try using the stereo one this time and see if it keeps our panning a little better. Importing this track preset will cause one or more tracks to be unfrozen. That's odd. All right, whatever. Go for it. We'll see. Okay. I'm going to switch back to the chat. We're going to wait here while Pro Tools decides whether or not it's going to import all of our sends. So for those of you who didn't see at the beginning what the session looked like, it wasn't a bad session. It was fine, but it was very disorganized. Namings, there was no rhyme or reason to a lot of the naming. There was a lot of extra characters that wasn't needing to be there. The groups were all just named group. Like it was just that looked like probably what my production sessions look like when I'm just like really flying and not thinking too much about like session organization and cleanliness. But when you're prepping for mix, That's when you want to like set aside time to do that. And so even when I'm not mixing a track that I've produced, I go through this whole process and I'll do a mix cleanup. And I really highly, highly, highly recommend that everybody else do the same. Holy crap, look, all our sends are there. That was so fast and snappy. Not really. Okay, so the other thing we're going to do really quickly is we're going to go through and make our template tracks inactive. Okay? So template there, template there. Oh, sorry, I forgot one step. We need to add our parallel comps for all of the groups. And you might say, Chris, why do you need to do that if you're not gonna, if you've actually made all of your parallel stuff inactive? Well, if I'm in the middle of a session, if I'm in the middle of mixing, and I decide that I do want to use a parallel bus for, let's say, the guitars, then it's already set up, ready to go. I don't have to go and add this send. So, again, there's rhymes and reasons to this stuff. Sorry, the I/O menu is off screen for you guys right now, but trust me, I'm doing it. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go and make all of that stuff. Actually, while we're here, I'll do the vocals. I'll add the vocals as well. Because then I'm going to show you what I do in this scenario with these vocal sends. There's a little bit of manual stuff going on, but you know, there's only so much you can kind of have like quick tricks for, and at some point you just gotta do things the old-fashioned way, I guess. Okay, so now we can go and turn off all of our template tracks and hide them. So I'm just gonna go select them all in all of the different food groups here. Boom. We never use these. We just use, like, we never actually put stuff on them. We're gonna make them inactive. We're gonna hide them and make them inactive. Okay. So now if you see all of our tracks here, we've got all of our sends on them. I'm actually gonna make all of our comp tracks inactive. Done. Cool. Drums is ready to go. Percussion is ready to go. Bass is ready to go enough. There's a whole other layer to drums and bass, but our guitars are ready to go. Collapse those. Our guitar B are ready to go. Our keys are ready to go. Lead vocals. Okay, so here's what we're going to do with this. So I've got two sends here that I don't want to get rid of. Okay? One of them, actually, they're both stereos. So we can do one of two things. As you guys know, I have a bunch of effects returns and sends already set up, and that I've got two stereo, an effect stereo 1, effect stereo 5, and then the monos, the 2, 3, 4, and the 6, 7, 8s are monos. All I'm going to do is, these are stereo. I'm just going to use these in place of the stereos that I otherwise would have had set up. So my stereos, as you can see in the track next to it, effect stereos in slot A, and effect stereo 1 is in slot A, and effect stereo 5 is in slot F. So I'm just going to move this 3, 4 to F, leave 1 and 2 in the first spot, right? 3, 4. Same with these backgrounds, okay? And now for the tracks that don't have anything on them, so let me just see here. So I can deselect, let's say anything that's got a 3 and 4 on it, I'll deselect. Okay. Perfect. And then all I'm going to do is go and add effect stereo 5, and then we'll turn that off. Okay. Same thing. We'll reverse engineer anything that doesn't have a 1, 2 on it. We'll select and we'll add our effect stereo 1 onto it. And I'm just using this track that's already got it set up as kind of our guide, right? just so that way it's easy to set the output, and then boom. Now all I have to do is fill in all the other slots, and I can just do that the exact same way, but I can select all of the tracks. Use the guide of this one, right? Find the check mark, turn them off. Find the check mark, turn them off. Find the check mark, and turn them off. We're going to skip over 5 because we already did that. Find the check mark, turn them off. Check mark, turn them off. Find the check mark, and turn them off. And there you go. That's formatted as well. So the next step, like this right now, this mix should theoretically sound very similar, if not exactly the same, minus the fact that I got rid of their master bus plugins, but I'd bring those back in when I'm confident that the system's not going to crash. And what I would do is I would bring those back in, put them on my master bus, copy over any master bus automation. And theoretically, this is now going through my routing, but sonically, this should sound almost identical, if not very close to the mix that was sent to me. So I have a place to jump off from, but I can fly around in this mix as fast as I want. There's probably 3 additional steps to the setup, but we're gonna leave it at this today. But I'll explain to you what those steps would be, just to give you a kind of a quick preview. The first step would be deciding what my plugin philosophy is going to be. Do I want to go and put SSL channels on all of the feeder tracks? So all the tracks that are inside all of the routing tracks. Do I just want to start with an SSL channel? Is there a different channel that I want? I've been using other channel strips every once in a while just for a little different sound, a little different, forces me to do things just a little differently, not the same old moves. Depending on what the song is, like if this was a country song, I might use something other than the SSL channel, channel strip, and just to give myself a different aesthetic a little bit. Am I going to start loading up my existing chains, or am I going to build new chains? I got to make those decisions on the plugins, and then either import that from a session that's already got plugins, or start adding those plugins into this session. So that's number one. The other thing that I would do is, because I've listened to the rough mix, I can have an idea of what my returns are going to be. So for instance, I know that the vocal, this is like a big rock vocal. I'm probably going to have a bunch of delay throws. So I'll start putting my delay throws in the spots that they always go. The drums, I've already got a lot of big samples. It looks like I've got a lot of room mics. So I probably won't put a bunch of like short room reverbs in my effects returns. Probably not going to need to use them. I might put other things. But I'll start loading up all of my effects returns, anticipating what I think I might want. And then the other 2 steps that I would do, and relating to the drums and the bass, is I like to use a bass MIDI track to trigger a sub-harmonic synthesizer. And when you use MIDI to trigger it, when the MIDI's following the bass, it makes sure that this tracks properly and it's generating the right note. Sometimes with like the DBX 120, if you solo it, you can kind of hear it. It's almost like when auto-tune doesn't know which note to go to, and it kind of like goes to the wrong note. It kind of does that too. So when you use MIDI, it doesn't have that problem. So what I would do is it looks like there's already a MIDI for this, probably somewhere in the inactive tracks down here. I would find the MIDI, and then I can use the MIDI to track the subharmonic synthesizer. And if there isn't any MIDI, then you can always do a right click, and then you can go copy audio as MIDI and then paste that onto the MIDI track. Here's the only problem. It's never really perfect. You still have to go in and line it up. You still have to go and change notes. It doesn't track notes that great all the time. So in that scenario, you might, find a trillion bass patch, put it on the, trigger that with the MIDI, edit that so it lines up with the bass properly, and then you're off to the races. The other thing that I typically do with my drum tracks is I will cut kick, snare, and tom triggers. Now, because there's so many samples in this already, I don't think I'm going to need to do that. But what cutting a trigger entails with like the kick and snare is basically duplicating the kick track and just going and getting a little snippet of every kick drum. So I can drag on like trigger or Massey DRT or sound replacer. I can just drag the threshold all the way down because there's not going to be any leakage. And I do that with the kick and the snare. So that way I can trigger new sounds. I'll also make a MIDI track with utilizing, once I've got the trigger cut, I'll use a MIDI track to, I'll use the trigger track to derive a MIDI track. Sorry. I'll do the same thing for the snare, and I'll insert any additional samples. The toms, I'll go through and I'll cut out any leakage. This is actually pretty good. This is not bad at all. But what I'll go in and do is basically go in and find kind of a good note value where the toms ring out. So let's say 3/8 notes, so a quarter note, another eighth, dotted quarter, and I'll just separate that, and I'll mute the section before it, and I'll mute the section after it, and then I'll just do a little fade out. And I'll just go do that for every hit of the toms. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but you can like most tom, unless the song's riding on the toms the whole time, you could probably do a whole song in 5 minutes. It's not 10 minutes at the most. It's not that big of a deal. So anyways, you go through and basically anytime there's not a tom playing, you mute it out. And anytime there is a tom playing, it comes in. You have it be, I like to time things to the rhythm of the song. So I find some songs it might have to die off quicker. Some songs it might ring out longer, but I like to find a note value and like rhythmic, and then just keep that consistent throughout the song with the toms. So that's I'll gate. I refer to this as manually gating the toms, because that's kind of what you're doing. You don't have to rely on setting thresholds and all that shit. And then the last thing I like to do with drums is, if it's needed, and this is an as needed basis. This song I don't, because I've already got like isolated cymbals because it was printed from a drum program. But I'll go and add crash samples on downbeats or any really heavily accented parts that should have. I want the crashes to be able to ride on top of the rest of the drum tracks. Once all of that's done, I'm pretty much ready to mix. And any little things that I need to do in addition to this is going to be so minor that it's not going to take me out of the mix mode. I'm just going to be able to keep mixing. Yeah, maybe I got to change a few things. Maybe I have to move one of the guitars to the other guitar. I got to move 2 tracks from guitar B to group A. I need to change a couple plugins. Maybe I need to change a couple reverbs. I didn't anticipate using the proper ones. No big deal. But I'm flying right now. This session is so organized. And you might be saying, well, aren't you opening and closing these folders all the time? My control surface, for every VCA fader, I've got a button that will spill out everything that's in that VCA fader. So a lot of the time, it takes me one button to spill out all the tracks that are within these folders on my control surface. And it actually isn't that big of a deal. You might want to use markers, or you might want to use window configurations to open these tracks. For instance, you can save a window configuration or a track or a marker where you have all of your drums opened up like this. And you can have a quick key that opens your drums, and then you can go back to everything collapsed. And you can program all that stuff. So figure out what works best for you, figure out what your tool set is, and build window configurations, use your markers for track show hide options. Like there's so many ways to do it. You got to find out what works best for you. I use a control surface that has all these kind of navigation functions. Makes it so much easier to navigate a session on a control surface. There's some mixes where it's like I feel like I'm barely doing any fader stuff, but I'm using the control surface almost exclusively to navigate the session. So, okay. Man, that was a marathon. Thank you guys so much for hanging with me. I really appreciate that. Let me find my chat here. I'm going to bring the chat back up. It's late, but if you guys want, I'll stick around for a little bit and let's do a little Q&A. Let me jump over to the chat here. Sorry, my chat window's so tiny. Let me move my mic. These glasses aren't working the way they used to. Okay. Mike, I don't need that so close. Pro Tools. Okay, Wes. Hey, Chris. Heard you on the Nail the Mix that use Vintech microphones for Nickelback. Yep, I do. Which one was it? And is that a standard for you with vocal tracking? I used to use the Vintex at the Chop Shop like over 20 years ago. Scott Humphrey had a bunch of like vintage. Well, actually, so did Chad. We had a bunch of vintage Neves, and the Vintex sound, in my opinion, and everybody else's opinion, they sound just as good. They don't sound exactly the same, but they sound just as good, and they're quieter, and they always work, and they're not like tens of thousands of dollars. We use the X81s. I think the X81s are kind of like the main ones, but I've also used, I at the Chop Shop, I remember we had 4 X81s, and then I had 2 of the 4-channel X73s. I think they call them 473s. And I would use those for things that I didn't need the expanded EQ for. Highly recommended. If you want Neve flavor and you don't want to spend a fortune and you don't care too much about like somebody coming over and being like, oh, those aren't real Neves. Like you get the gear snobs. If you just want something solid that sounds great, that's like relatively affordable for what it is, highly recommend the Vintex. I mean, there's a bunch of good Neve clones, but I've been using the Vintex for a long time. They're reliable, solid, sound great. Yeah, big fan. I ask because I have a Phoenix Audio Ascent 1 EQ pre and plan to compare to a Vintech at my job, front-end audio. Yeah, shoot them out. It's interesting. I mean, I'm going to do a whole episode on my favorite tools, and we're going to get into this a little bit. With 2 dB of EQ, pick any frequency you want. Pick a frequency. 2 dB of EQ on an EQ7 stock plugin in Pro Tools on any track is going to make a bigger difference, or is going to be a more recognizable difference than probably the difference between like 2 different mic pre's. I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but that's kind of the truth. It's funny. I've done some like, I mean, I'm not gonna publicly fuck with people, but I've done some A/B comparisons with, when I've been trying to prove a point with people, where I'll take like 4 mic pre's or even 4 microphones that are like, we're shooting out U47s, and I'll duplicate a track and I'll render like 2 dB of like 2K or like 1 dB of 10K into the duplicate track and render it in and say like, oh yeah, that's number 4, or that's the other mic pre, and people are like, oh, that one's great. Hear the top end, it's so nice. And I'm like, the other 3 they have a hard time telling a difference between, and I'm like, well, that's just number 1 with EQ on it. So I'm you know what, I don't really go down the rabbit hole of I'm not that precious anymore. I used to be. And then real world testing proved that it's actually, the difference is pretty minor a lot of the time. So, but it's fun. So do it. Yeah, for sure. But the Vintex are great. The Vintex are great. I actually just sold them. I used to have a pair of the BAE. I think they were called 1032s. They were like a 1081 EQ, but a 1073 mic pre. They were great too. They were expensive, but they looked like vintage Neve pre's, and they sounded pretty close and whatever. And it's like when I would have people come to my studio when I was in LA, and people, I had a couple people come over, and they're like, I was at the time, I think I might have, what did I have? I don't know if I had Chandler's or Focusrite. I really like the Focusrite ISA stuff. Anyways, they're like, oh no, we're gonna have to go rent some Neves. And I'm like, what? Like, no, you haven't even heard anything yet. And so it was a little bit of a thing. I kind of I felt like I had to have the thing that everybody wanted. I would never waste the money on that shit ever again. Like I would, if I wanted Neve flavor stuff, I would just probably go buy a bunch of Vintex or something else that is equally as good or cheaper or, whatever. Right. So, be curious to know how you handle backing up and archiving sessions if you haven't covered it previously. I did a little bit on the last episode, but basically my backup every night, I use a program called ChronoSync, and I back up to a raw hard drive that goes into a Cradle. And then I also do a cloud backup as well, where it's basically like a copy of, it's not a Finder copy. It's like a ChronoSync copy from folder to folder, and then the archive folder gets backed up. Man, it's important. I've been saved by backups several times, and it only takes once of getting fucked by not having a backup to never make that mistake again. And that's happened a couple times, not only to me, but the clients. I've had clients, and I said, whenever I'm working with anybody, I always like, if they have a studio, that's like the first thing we do on like day one. It's kind of like, hey, what's your backup? Oh, I just, every once in a while, I'll just drag all my folders onto a spare drive. And I'm like, nope. And I'll just buy them whatever they need and bill it to the session or whatever. But they like, it's potentially one of the most important things to have in the studio. Like, I know guys that have $50,000 worth of guitars, but like don't want to spend $500 for like a proper backup system. It's like, come on. So back it up. Yeah, for sure. But find a system that works. Don't do Finder copies though. Finder copies are dangerous, and I've been screwed by those. So don't just drag folders around or drag files into folders and stuff like that. Don't do that. Use a proper backup system. ChronoSync. I used to use Folder Synchronizer. There's a bunch of them out there. Find one you like and use it. Yeah. Hey, Schmerler, how's it going, bud? Wes, all good. Thank you. Enjoying this. Glad. Thank you, Wes. JR, agree. Stuff's amazing. Staying organized, consistent is important. Man, I mean, not to beat a dead horse on that, but yes, it's very, if you can figure out a way to just make all of this stuff become like second nature, to where you know where everything is. You don't have to think about where everything is. It's like, if you want to find a guitar track, you go get it. If you want to add, if you're like, man, you know what? This bass just really isn't having the punch and the impact or the sustain that I want. I think the only way I can do it is with parallel compression. It's already set up, ready to go. You've got a parallel line ready to go. You don't have to think about putting it on. Like, just have everything ready to go. And if you've set it up strategically in a way that makes sense for you, then ultimately your instinct is going to be where to find that, or it's going to be the proper thing. So like, follow your instincts as opposed to having to think about something. Because if your first instinct is, my drums are in the first spot, then that's where you're going to go. Don't put them in the third spot and try to like retrain your brain. Like, that's working, like swimming upstream, So, do I typically start mixing from top folder down, i.e. main snare folder, EQ comp first, then go to individual snare tracks within the folder? Actually, kind of the opposite. So typically what I'll do is I'll break everything open. I'll open up all the folders, and I'll start getting, again, hands on the faders, and I'll start balancing the snare drum until I'm like, okay, cool, that's good. Make sure I'm not clipping that folder track too much. If If it's clipping, it's fine. If it sounds okay, it's fine. But just I like to leave myself some headroom. And if I don't, I'll just bring it all down. And I'll find a balance, and then I'll close that fader, and I'll go to the next and get some rough balances, so then I can start mixing. Because if you get lost in the 12 tracks of snare drums and you haven't like gotten 75% of the mix done, you're just going to be chasing your tail. So I'll get a balance to where I'm like, that sounds cool. Or in this case, it's a rough mix that already sounds really good. I'll run with their balance, and I'll start mixing from those folder tracks because the balance within it is already kind of pretty good. And then if you have to open them up, like a perfect scenario is this mix I just finished, which was extremely dense. Like I said, I maxed out Pro Tools, like no tracks, no voices left. And I found at the very end of the mix, I went back and opened up the snare folder and made 2 moves that like were like, that's it. But up until that point, I probably hadn't opened that snare folder in like probably like for 75% of the mix. So, do you bounce guitar tracks that have multiple mics, or put the tracks in routing folders so you can rebalance at any point at needed? Josh, I do both. I mean, I ultimately, if I'm producing the track, I'll bounce, I'll commit, I'll find a balance, and I'll print it. I highly recommend producers. If you've been on from the beginning of today's stream, you'll have heard me say this. If you're a producer, produce. It's your job to make decisions, make some decisions. So if you got 5 mics or 3 mics or 2 cabinets and 4 speakers or whatever, figure out a way to make it sound like the way, like get it to where you like it and print it. And if you're really that unsure, or if you're really that like maybe not, you don't know really where the mix is going to go, you're like, well, I don't know, I'm going to hand this off to Chris and he's going to make it really bright, so maybe committing is not such a good idea. Then yes, at least put it in a folder, balance it the way you think it sounds, close the folder. I can open it up and be like, yeah, you know what? Now that everything's brightened up, I need to add, the 57 needs to come up 4 dB or whatever, right? That's fine. But it does bother me a little bit when I either get tracks that it's like, oh, you just decide. Everything's at 0 and it sounds nothing like the rough mix. And I'm like, well, what do you like? Do you like woody sounding guitars? Do you like bright guitars? Do you like not bright guitars? Do you like kind of like dull, like mid-rangey guitars? Like, at least give me a balance, and that will give me an idea of what you like, and then I'll take it from there. So I like it when people commit. But if you're unsure, or, you know, if not, the folder track's a great way to go, because ultimately if it sounds good and it's like, yeah, that balance is good, I can just treat that as if it was a bounce. So, all right. Hope that answered that question, Josh. Tom, it's all great information. Appreciate you taking the time. Oh man, thank you so much, Tom. You've been in here from the beginning. I appreciate it. This is a long haul. We had some technical snags early on, so thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, the rock solid audio for the 4K micros are great. Yeah, it makes mixing fun when you can just put your hand on knobs and tweak EQs really fast, and it's also nice not necessarily always looking at EQs. I think you'll find that you're using your ears more, and you're making decisions less obviously based on your eyes, but you'll be doing things that you'll otherwise, if you saw, or if you had to do with a mouse and you had to stare at the knob, maybe you wouldn't have done, even though it was the right thing to do. So it's a pretty, having control surfaces are highly recommended in one way or another. I think that's why a lot of people, me myself included, had a hard time mixing in the box. There was too much, like the mouse screen was too much of a barrier for me, staring at the screen, and like just it was a filter to what I really wanted to do. And yeah, that's how I got over that hump. I can mix a whole song with a mouse and a screen now. It's no big deal. But to get over that hump, I had to use a control surface back in the day. So any other questions, guys? Man, this was a long one. Thank you so much for hanging in. And I also just want to say a huge thank you. A lot of you guys have reached out. I know this isn't the sexiest topic, but it's important, and I will try to mix in a couple more exciting and maybe a little bit more intriguing live stream topics amongst all the minutia. But if there's something I can't stress enough, is a lot of the time the difference between the guys who are doing this at a really high level and the guys who are trying to, the guys who are doing it at a high level have figured out a way to cut through the minutia, to cut through the technical shit, the organizational stuff. They've basically been able to like optimize their whole system, their workflow, their thought process, their instincts. Everything's been refined and set up in such a way that supports and basically facilitates the creative process. And so if you're not thinking about this, or if you're thinking like yeah, whatever, like, doesn't really matter what my track's named, like, yeah. If it doesn't matter for you, it doesn't matter. But make sure you've determined that it doesn't matter and that it actually is not impeding your creativity or, the final output of what you're doing. Because I've seen the opposite more often than not. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of guys out there, and like, I know why. I mean, you're not going to sell. You're not going to get 1 million views showing people how to name Pro Tools tracks. It's not going to pay the bills. So that's why a lot of YouTubers are not doing that. It's not sexy. It's not intriguing. It's really not the quick, flashy, grabby stuff. But it's extremely important. And I think you'll find the more of the kind of the high level professionals that you interface with, the more you will see that stuff like this, it's second nature to them, and it's part of the process, and it's very important. So that's that. Any other questions here? Oh, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Okay. All right. Well, I actually have to shut down for the night because I've got a long weekend ahead of me. I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get, I've kind of been doing every other week. I'm going to try to get to another one next week, and maybe I'll maybe we'll do something fun next week if this wasn't fun. But thank you all so much. If you haven't already subscribed, definitely subscribe, follow me on socials, and the biggest help that you guys can do for me is just to share this with people who might like it. Obviously, you guys know how the algorithm works and how all these YouTubes and socials work. So the more people I can get watching, the more people I can get liking and subscribing, the easier it is for me to keep doing this and be able to share some insight as to kind of how we make these crazy records. These crazy things called records. So anyways, thanks guys. Have a great night. Talk to you next week. And if you have any questions or additional comments, put them in the comments. DMing me is great, but putting them where everybody else can see them is awesome. Because if I answer it, then everybody else can get the answer as well. So thank you all. Until next week, enjoy the weekend.